Michelle Egan is a professor with the School of International Service at American University, also a global fellow with the Woodrow Wilson Center's Global Europe program. Michelle, welcome back. Always great to see you in the building.
Thank you very much, John.
Now, when you and I first met, we were talking about Brexit, and this was about a year from the epic vote, the surprising vote where Great Britain made the choice to leave the EU. So here we are now recording this discussion on the eve of the day, March 29th, when Theresa May will make that official. She said, this is one of the most significant moments in Great Britain's recent history. Tell me about the whirlwind ride for you following this story for as long as you've been, and what tomorrow means to you.
Well, tomorrow will be the official day that Theresa May will notify the EU of their effort to leave, and they will have a 2-year window of negotiations, and it is consuming British politics. And one also has to remember that for the Europeans, this is one of many issues they will be facing, in addition to elections in France and Germany. And they will have to get a negotiating mandate together, put all of the different ducks in a row, so to speak, and find out and decide what they want to negotiate with Britain. And so we have a great deal on our plate. There are many, many issues that are concerning. Will this impact our economy? What will happen in terms of our free trade agreements? What will happen amongst all of the EU citizens in the UK and those UK citizens in Europe, which has been a tremendously politicized issue? And we also have to think about, the long-term security, defense, intelligence cooperation we want to have. We're still a member till we walk out of the door.
Till the negotiations are complete.
Till the negotiations are complete.
And there's no handbook or playbook for this. This Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty is several paragraphs. So it's not explicit about all the things, all those little details and big issues that need to be ironed out. So you mentioned a 2-year window, but there is the potential for an extension. Can this be done in 2 years?
Most people think that because it's a divorce, that it's possible, but given time frames, given the fact that the EU Commission will not want to start any negotiations till May or June after the elections in France. So we also have that playing into it. And then it also has to be ratified in the European Parliament and in the British Parliament. So you have to build in a window. So it's going to be either, some people think it's not going to happen within 2 years. Some people think Britain will not take the deal on the table, and some people think we might need an extension beyond those 2 years. So there's very different opinions out there right now.
I've heard as many as 5 to 10 years from some, I guess more pessimistic about how things might proceed. You've mentioned the elections in Germany and France twice. Depending on those outcomes, how much of an impact will they have on these negotiations? Is it potentially significant?
I think it's just the fact that there's the two largest original members of the EU, and this week is also the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome. It's sort of ironic, all 27 member states, or many of the member states, were in Rome for a celebration, and Britain was conspicuously absent. It was conspicuously absent 60 years ago, and it is today. So I think that it's also the fact that, both Angela Merkel and Scholz, the two main candidates in Germany, are very pro-European. And, the big issue as the two large economies, the two important states, is how they will feel about Britain. Will this be a hard Brexit? Will they negotiate tough? Or will they think about what is the impacts of losing Britain on other economies? One of the most impacted economy is likely to be Ireland. Ireland went in with Britain in 1973. At the time, 50% of its trade was with Britain. Now it's 15%. So it's much less, but they're still highly integrated as an economy. So there are deep concerns about what the impact will be, not just on the UK economy, not just on the other member states, but particularly a country like Ireland.
And you mentioned you're in until you're out. So during whatever the negotiation period lasts, if it's the 2 years that's prescribed or if there's an extension, does that mean Britain can't negotiate any new trade deals or change any of the rules until the exit is 100% complete?
This has been an interesting issue because Britain has informally started talks with many countries and has indicated it would like to do free trade, bilateral free trade agreements. Obviously, the US comes most to mind. But until it is legally out of the EU, it can't sign anything, it can't formally negotiate. And most of those countries are not going to want to negotiate till they see what are the terms and conditions of British exit. So there are many, many issues here on the table. And the other sort of interesting element of this is everybody focuses on Article 50 and this trigger to leave the EU. Ironically, it was written by a Brit or Scot, Lord Kerr. And he didn't ever anticipate that it would be Britain that would be the one to use it. I think he thought it was sort of an exit option for perhaps a country that fell remarkably out in a more authoritarian path, and they would be pushed out. So it's a very, very different turn of events.
Speaking of the author, he was asked recently about what if Britain changes its mind somewhere along the way? And he said, well, the article doesn't really address that in a prohibitive manner, so I guess that would be possible. What do you think the odds are of something like that, some surprise happening along the way to Brexit?
Is it irrevocable? I think he feels it is possible to take a step back and not go. I think that ship has sailed. I think given the fact that Theresa May and the administration, the Whitehall administration, is geared up now towards leaving, as the member states are thinking about it as well, I don't think they take very kindly to Britain sort of having a change of their mind. Legally, it would be potentially possible, but we have to also think about less the negotiations now, but also what happens when Britain leaves. We have thousands of pieces of legislation that are tied to EU law, tied to EU rules, regulations. We can't possibly at one fell swoop say, no, they no longer apply. So we're going to probably spend the next 5-10 years probably going through those regulations, figuring out what we're keeping, what we're amending, and what we're implementing. And that can be anything from fisheries to financial services. So we have a massive job. So Whitehall, that's the central government agency, is going to have to do a great deal of coordination.
A bottom line thought that we need to address, even though it's too early, is this notion of that was part of the campaign for or against. Does this action make the UK stronger or weaker? We certainly don't know the answer to that yet, but what are the things that you'll be looking at in an attempt to eventually answer that question?
I think that the economy will be central, and the question about foreign direct investment, will that continue? I think the other issue is growth, economic growth in the UK. Inflation is rising. So all of the economic indicators. The one thing we should say is right after Brexit, about 9 months ago or so, the pound depreciated, and people thought, wow, you know, that makes imports more expensive. Exports will really surge, and they haven't. So we haven't actually seen the sort of negative recession that people anticipated right at the time, especially those who wanted to remain. So we've got to look at the long-term growth of the economy. We've got to look at foreign direct investment, and we've got to look at how many companies decide now to leave. And to relocate. And it is happening on the margins. So all of those kind of things will be very, very important. And the last issue will be the big political football here is immigration. What to do. And it's not the immigration that most people are thinking about in terms of refugees, asylum seekers. It's the millions of UK residents and EU residents in their respective states. And that's been highly controversial.
Final quick thought, and forgive me for asking you to speculate, but I'm looking for a guess. Do you anticipate that this will be a smooth transition, or do you expect a bumpy road?
I do not expect it to be a smooth transition. I expect it to be, I do believe that Europeans, particularly Germany and France, are already getting their players in place, people who are going to be their negotiators as member states, putting forward their views. I think the British are now anticipating how large it's going to be, how involved this process is. And while they're talking about it's going to be messy for the fact that they're negotiating with the EU, it's also going to be messy because they have the issue of union and Scotland on the agenda. And I think it's thirdly going to be messy because of the uncertainty about EU citizens and UK citizens. So none of this is going to be particularly easy, but there is also a sense that some people have argued, and I'm not sure if this is correct or not, taking out Britain, will this actually foster more unity within the EU?
Well, certainly lots of moving parts. I take some comfort in knowing you'll be here to help us sort through it as things transpire. Michelle, good to see you, and thank you for today.
Thank you very much.